Hey, welcome, Cameron, to the build. You're looking fresh-faced as always.
Tom, I can't hear you if you're talking. Sorry. Did you do the whole intro? Messed it up.
Yeah, but it was shit anyway, so don't worry about it.
All right, welcome to the build. So it's moving quickly.
And their product velocity is intense. We're both pretty involved in the LangChain community.
This is going to be an industry, like the whole thing is going to explode.
The hype cycle, it's like just because you hear everybody start talking about these things doesn't necessarily mean it's the right.
Need to go back, find out more because it's really interesting.
We're both obsessed with AI. Their entire stack is just pivoted to agents.
The next question that usually comes after that is like, well, I'm fine-tuning an open model.
That's the biggest thing with the latest spec.
An exploding distribution vector.
I'm really excited. I think everybody is. I'm not the only one.
The build.
Let's get into another week post GPT-5 week. So this week we are going to go through and make it a bit more practical. Let's talk about the shit we're actually building and talk about 7 days post GPT-5 launch and our respective opinions and perspectives on using it. As a fair bit of other stuff has gone down, but I don't know. This week I tried to take a little bit of a like AI news light approach because I was just a bit done with AI news. I'm like, you get to that point, you're like, oh man, I just can't handle any more hyped up, like astroturfing style X posts where they're like, and now this changes everything. I'm like, mate,
Yeah.
change anything at all.
I know, man. I go through waves myself. I think I've mentioned that where I don't know if people interpret it like I don't pay attention to news at all. That's not true. It's just it can be so much sometimes and sorting through the noise, what's actually important. Twitter is definitely hype central. LinkedIn is kind of different, a different flavor of hype central. I don't know. So I hope it's been peaceful for you.
What have you been building?
Well, still doing a lot and learning a lot about Claude Code and some of the CLI tools, getting some new ideas. So we'll talk about that. And of course, the crossover with MCP, I'm super interested in. So we'll hit on that. But yeah, why don't we just talk about GPT-5, start there. I think it's quite a bit different of a discussion than we anticipated, right? Because we filmed our last episode the day it released, decided to hold off. And I was really surprised. In the following days, I was like, yeah, this changes our review or conversation. It doesn't change my opinion or my review, but we just don't have as much like highlights and stuff like that as I thought. So
yeah, the launch was actually interesting, which is something we should probably touch on. So they brought in a bunch of partners and they did like a typical kind of tech launch. They copped a bit of flack because there were like errors in their charts and a bunch of other stuff. I'm like, oh, that's sort of by the by. Like, I don't know about that. But what I thought was interesting is they pushed it hard into a couple of distribution partners first with like a pretty aggressive kind of distribution. So they got that Cursor partnership and one of the Cursor founders was there talking about it. And then you could use it for free for the week. And so that's where I've been using it mostly. And my experience through there initially was very good. Then I was working on something actually in production on an agent. We have a voice agent that it's voice and then it passes over to a basic LLM via OpenAI that we were trying to adapt it to GPT-5 and trying to see what we could do with it. And in my testing around that, either through the API, through the playground, or with the developers was pretty poor. And then yeah, there's just a few things in there that are like I was testing it and I was doing different kind of, not testing, but like using it. And there was a few times where I was like, oh man, I just miss like O3. Like, there was a couple of times where I was like, I really miss that. On the other hand, like I do find the routing component where it tries to adapt to your interaction pattern, at least through the ChatGPT interface. Sometimes that is quite good and having that embedded in the model. But again, like OpenAI is really great at product and they're very good at marketing. So that's something that's been in like Gemini for a while, right? Like thinking budget, but it's like when OpenAI does it, similar to what they did with, say, Operator and Deep Research and now Agent, they're kind of just better at simplifying things and taking it to the market, if you know what I mean. And I kind of feel like GPT-5 was like that. I don't know. Where do you want to go with this? Do you want to go through some of the benchmarks or what's your perspective?
I just think it's interesting that I felt like you heard everyone saying there are too many models I don't want to choose, and then they simplified it. And I don't know for a fact it's the same people, but like my feeling is that it's the same people who are like, just give me all my options. It's kind of hard to satisfy everybody. And I think
Well, welcome to product.
yeah, right. So the automatic selection and routing, I think that definitely makes sense when you're talking about agents, right? So as far as people go, I think we'll always have our personal preferences. It's very difficult to meet everybody, from the super technical to the non-technical. Everybody has different needs. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. The part I did not expect, Tom, was maybe I should have, the backlash about bringing back GPT-4 for like my friend, or people who are like, I rely on GPT-4 as my therapist or my buddy. Like,
I didn't see
have you seen
that.
much?
Tell me, what's that?
Yeah, that's primarily what I've seen, is the backlash about taking the models away, not so much from the technical folks, but non-technical people who are like pretty isolated, I guess. Or you've heard even Sam Altman has said people are increasingly using our models as like life coaches and personal friends and like companions, right? So I saw a bunch of stuff about people saying like, I'm doomed now. It's the only thing that helped my depression, which
Well, yeah, I
yeah,
wondered
that's
why. Yeah, okay. So I didn't see that, but I wondered why they reintroduced GPT-4o as a model choice in the app, in the ChatGPT interface. Right. And they must be dealing with, I guess, when you get to hundreds of millions of users, the edge cases become tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, right? And so you have to deal with this sort of consideration, like and a non-trivial one at that. Yeah, that's pretty intense.
yeah. So that's a whole, I mean, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but
You're my psychologist.
that's a big topic. I do like how within the chat interface, very minor, they switched the descriptions to auto, fast, thinking, and pro. I think that actually is just yesterday, maybe, or in the last couple of days. And I'm wondering, I don't know for a fact, but I was working with someone yesterday, and their GPT desktop app was switching, or it was set to 4.0 automatically. Mine is not. So I'm like, is that based on your memories, your history? Are they kind of painting you as, are they selecting for you? I don't know. I'd like to dive into that more.
Yeah, mine are definitely defaulting to 5 now. The benchmarks, obviously, like the primary benchmarks are being saturated. So if anyone wants to, you can check out artificial analysis, but it is topping basically the majority of those benchmarks. And then I saw this week the Arc AGI guys released like another benchmark, right? Well, they did an announcement. Greg Cameron did an announcement on another benchmark. So obviously they're seeing Arc AGI 2 is probably the next one that's going to fall. So they need to introduce more challenging benchmarks over time. I haven't checked in with those. Like I saw some of the hype reels ahead of time, but I'm like, I kind of feel like the Arc AGI tests are now becoming less relevant when we're looking for more practical, like use case based benchmarks, like the terminal bench or like some of the agentic benchmarks.
Right.
But it definitely, like GPT-5 high it's beating Groq 4, but only marginally on, say, the aggregate meta benchmark for artificial analysis. It's expensive, but not as expensive as some of the competitors. Like I'm consistently just disappointed by the API-based pricing on Anthropic, for example. Like, I don't know, every time I have to use an API key for a test or something, I'm like, that was just the most egregious charge of tokens. Like, I guess in summary, my experience has been, this is a really good model and I'll definitely keep using it through the GPT-5. Like that's my workhorse. Sorry, the GPT chat app. That's sort of my chat workhorse, but I'm not moving to my coding over to it.
Yeah.
The testing with Cursor was great initially, but then I think as the model kind of selection process optimizes, some of the outcomes are very, very bad, like really bad. For example, I was trying to do something that I thought was very simple yesterday. And one of the agents I want to show later in the show called DeepUi on the deep agent
Mm-hmm.
pattern from LangChain. And all I wanted to do was switch it out and use GPT-5 at the LangChain core OpenAI chat adapter. And that was it. Like, so something that's relatively simple. And it basically rebuilt the app and destroyed its functionality and stopped it from working. Like, it took about 20 minutes and it's just like, this is crap. Like, it doesn't have, I guess, that coding nuance that obviously the Anthropic guys have really tried hard to deliver through some of their more complicated kind of execution frameworks around coding that make me trust Claude Code way more. And it's going to take a lot to disrupt me from that pattern now, because it's basically embedded for me.
And you had that experience using GPT-5 through Cursor, is that what you said?
So yeah.
Yeah.
So
well,
because I turned off all of the models in the cursor selection except for the GPT-5 ones.
Sure.
Which there's like,
yeah, I mean,
5.
there's some nuance there, because if you're using coding agents or something like Cursor, I mean, there's a level of abstraction on top. And so if you use like Klein versus Cursor versus other tools, you're going to have a different experience, and I don't know. Cursor was part of that announcement or that video, so you think they have it pretty optimized, but they probably are still working on it, I would imagine.
Yeah. There's a lot of, obviously we know that from building agents through LangChain, there's like an abstraction nuance of any kind of agent layer execution and just plugging in the new model into something new. But as an end user, that's effectively what everyone does.
Right.
So it's a not my problem kind of thing. Like, if they really want to attack the coding application of LLMs, which is where the main battle is now, right? Between all of these big model providers for the active users, and the primary use case around, business function around AI is basically coding seems to be the number one area where it's transforming the way people work. So that's why they want to get in there. If they really want to get in there, they're going to have to make that way better, right? Regardless of where the person interacts with it and how they interact with it, they're going to have to improve that if they want to disrupt Anthropic's position. And Anthropic seems like they just keep getting more and more entrenched in the coding use case layer.
Yep.
And that was my experience of it. I saw like so many one shot code me like a blah, blah, blah insert thing here. They all look great. I don't know. I just don't trust those posts on X anymore.
Yeah. And we've said that before. I mean, you go on Twitter, that's all you see. And it's kind of almost like things are optimized for that type of thing. It's a far less exciting to me as it once was, as far as like, I can just one shot prompt this thing that looks really cool, but it doesn't, I don't think, equate to like true performance. And for me, like, as far as GPT, I was using, as of late, GPT 4.1 sometimes for coding. Like, that was kind of a backup. But to be honest, I've really only used GPT for like web search. I noticed that it's like a natural pattern. Like, without even thinking about it, if I need to search something, I'll use typically ChatGPT. I've been using the open source GPT OSS far more than I've used GPT.
Yeah, so you talked about that a lot last week. What's changed on your perspective of that?
Not much has changed on my perspective. I think it's really good, and especially with the combination of MCP. I actually, can I share this real quick? I took a Grok. I found a Grok desktop app that they're working on, open source, and I added it. So it supports MCP, and I think it's probably one of the most capable desktop apps, full, like all across the board functionality. So I set that up so that it works with Llama Turbo or Llama Local, and I've been actually using that as my, like, even above Claude desktop.
Really? Yeah, so I saw that and that you shared it. Can you just show it to me quickly?
Yeah.
While you're pulling that up, before we jump completely off GPT-5, the only last things I wanted to say about GPT-5 is one thing that someone mentioned, which was interesting on X, was Sebastian Bubeck, who's one of the researchers there, basically said that they're experimenting with new sets of training techniques. And the first iteration of that came with GPT-5. they have acknowledged that they are training the next iteration of this, like of the GPT models as well. Apparently a version of that was the model that they put into this Amy math Olympiad. So they are accelerating still. But what he said in this was basically in the announcement, he said that they used O3 to craft high quality synthetic curriculum and synthetic data to teach GPT-5 very complex topics. Basically taking training data, converting it into something that was more effective at training in a way that like just human generated data or other data on the web wouldn't be able to teach it effectively. And so obviously synthetic data has been a significant contributor for quite a while to different types of model training. But the innovation was basically, it's not just more data, it's creating the right kind of data shaped in the right way to train and fill that latent space of the model. And then basically saying that interaction pattern between like prior generations and next generations to incrementally improve, which is what they showed with GPT-5, is something that is significant. Now, if that holds, then that's a path up the intelligence curve that is self-recursive, and that is significant. That's like a significant indicator that acceleration will occur. Now, on the flip side, the other big thing that people talked about, which I do agree with, is this ChatGPT-5 model was a very obvious example of the log linear performance improvement of the scaling laws, where 10x kind of increase in rough rule of thumb in compute in order to get a X improvement in base level kind of intelligence, if you can call it intelligence in these models. And the rub on that is like they're trying to see, well, how far can these scaling laws go? The step change is there in GPT-5, but it's nowhere near as perceivable to us based on the benchmarks we have yet, compared to say GPT 3.5 to 4. People are saying like, is this a slowdown in scaling laws? And unless this like a era of experience equivalent, that the Google DeepMind guys talk about, or this recursive kind of learning and synthetic data kind of feedback loop, will that be enough to break the slowdown? If it's not, I was talking about this with a mate of mine who he follows the markets quite a lot, does a bit of investing. It's like, if it's not, then we will see a wholesale kind of with like slowdown in the commitment of significant amount of capital, I think, from these big companies. Because if they can't see some degree of that acceleration, at least maintaining from where they are now, then there's no reason why they'll say maintain their commitments to spend hundreds of billions of dollars across all the Mag 7 on these things. Like that's was interesting. That was acknowledged, I think, from this launch, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we need to keep an eye on that. I've heard a lot about that as well. And people are essentially saying, like, since GPT-03 up to that point, it was kind of like, hey, this is just a today problem, paying for all the inference. We're not too worried about it because it will become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And all of a sudden, we're kind of hitting that wall where people are backstepping, right?
Well, there's training and then there's inference compute, right? And training is like inference is using, and training is like baking the cake. To be fair, to your point, like the vast majority of the investment is in inference compute, right? The usage of these things. And a lot of the bet is actually saying, well, this is just going to, even if they all just stayed still from here, this intelligence layer hasn't been embedded into all of the experience that we have across devices, robotics, all sorts of things. So it's going to be massive either way. But it's more the bet a lot of these companies are really riding on, big and smaller, like OpenAI is a big company, but it's smaller than, Amazon and Google.
Right.
Is we are building AGI or ASI, right? That's the bet. And that's why all these companies are like, yeah, let's accelerate into that, because that's a pretty big bet. And if we're not part of that race, but then, bad things will happen to us in the future in terms of their market position. However, that's a bet that's still not realized. So if that comes off the boil, they're like, well, okay, we don't necessarily need to be offering AI researchers billion-dollar comp packages, and we don't necessarily need to be like investing 100% in this as our strategic imperative across all of the Mag 7 companies, right? That's sort of like the paradigm. So that's what that's what I wanted to mention based on what this guy was meant.
On GPT-5, there are a couple things that caught my attention that are worth looking into, and that is the verbosity parameter is new. The custom tools, which looks like it's potentially kind of competes with MCP. It makes me wonder with OpenAI's kind of like half-assed approach to supporting MCP, if they're kind of going their own direction with that.
Well, actually, that is interesting. Yeah. So when I was doing my testing, I did play with the reasoning and the verbosity kind of parameters in the API. Verbosity basically is just like response length. It's basically just like an abstraction layer over the top of, rather than saying, give me this many tokens. It's like, well, you decide, but I kind of want a short, medium, or a long answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the reasoning is self-explanatory. What's the tool? I didn't know about that. So what's that?
Yeah, I haven't tested it yet, but if you read the documentation, essentially what I'm reading is you can, like GPT-5 can construct the schema that you need for tools without having to like explicitly program them in exactly the correct JSON format.
And this is this related to the tool, downstream tool kind of output that's basically plain text as well?
I believe so. Yeah. So there's an example using
that. Yeah, that's weird. And I was like, I don't really get all that. Like, so I don't need to be specific about the syntax in my tool call. I can just say, go and get me this thing go and get my recent emails.
Right. So yeah, I need to get my hands on it to really be able to talk about it. But if you're trying to search for it, it's related to context-free grammar as well. So that kind of seems like its own topic a lot there. So anyways.
Yeah, let's test it out and then maybe we can show it in a demo.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Right. All right. So we'll hit this really quick.
Yeah, man.
All right. So on the left, this is the stock Groq desktop. You can we'll put the link in the notes, but it's very easy to spin up. You just clone the repo and install and then npm run essentially. But, actually, I'm sorry. The Groq is a Electron desktop. So you can do it either way. If you want to develop on it, spin it up like a normal JavaScript application, or you can just install it on your desktop, which is what I have here on the Groq. But this, in previous episodes, you've asked me about why do I use Claude Desktop? And I said it's primarily because of the MCP integrations. Well, it's not. Anthropic Desktop still has some limitations. Like some servers you have to configure in the JSON file. Some you can add as connectors, and it's still a little bit confusing. But Groq has added full support for all the different types of MCP, and it's very easy as long as you kind of have some background on setting up the parameters and how this works. But if you go into the settings, all you have to do, you can configure your Groq API key. And if you're not dealing with MCP, that's all you need. And then you have access to all the models on Groq. You have some options it has a built-in code interpreter and browser search, which is pretty standard anymore. For a while, we were adding MCP servers for web search, but a lot of these have it built in now. All right. So down here, these are the MCP servers that I have configured, and it's just really easy. I just put a description, and anymore I'm running primarily remote MCP servers. They're so much more reliable and easy to manage. So if you're setting up a remote server, all you need is the command is npx mcp -remote, and then you put in your MCP servers. That's all you need. Yep. So if you're someone who you see the value in MCP, you want to experiment with it more, but it's been difficult, I think this helps with that quite a bit. So now that you see where I've added those servers, I can go into the tools and I can disable or enable the ones that I want. I have this little auto start switch so that when I boot up the application, they will automatically connect or not connect depending on what I choose. And that's actually really great because once you start adding a lot of servers and a lot of tools, it can cause problems as far as it slows down the applications, it takes a long time to load, and it chews up a lot of context. especially if you have servers with a lot of tools, because it basically, to initialize, it reads the entire description and what those tools do so that it knows how to call them. So yeah, I think they've done a great job, and it's, at least from my perspective, it's really easy to use. So this is, like I said, on the left, this is the Grok application, and I have all of their models. I mentioned I'm primarily using GPT OSS maybe, and you saw how fast that was. I think Groq, I saw several places that Grok was the second fastest provider for GPT OSS.
Yeah, I think it's second only to Cerebrus, but Cerebrus has some context window constraints, I believe. They may have worked through, but the last time I checked in with that they were like, we are the fastest, but the context window was like 4,000 tokens.
Exactly. It's kind of similar, like we're talking about Cursor, and every agent or every tool that you use, it could be the same model, but you'll have different experiences. That's the same thing applies to this GPT OSS or any other open source models. Whoever's providing it has, there's some nuance there. So
I reckon Grok is definitely the best. Like the fact that they're LPU chips and like they've done the innovation on that layer. I still haven't seen any like big commercial diffusion models that would disrupt their competitive position around speed. And now that OSS is out, like you've got just like a real hardcore workhorse in addition to these Chinese labs that are just continuing to release. Like I saw like some of the like Z AI and some of these other labs are still like pushing Quen, of like Alibaba's never going to give up on those Quen models. Like it's just a really great stack. And you showing me this, I'm just like, yeah, I can get it actually executing locally. Well, not locally, but on my desktop, to actually use it more practically. That's one of the challenges I had as someone who's not as technical as you. So yeah, this is super helpful, mate. Really, really cool.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, even if you had preferred Grok in the past, it took a little bit of finagling to every provider's, like the way that they structure their URLs and how you have to call them. They're all different for the most part. So this, just having it ready to go on your desktop, I think is amazing. And I've been using this constantly. And, you know, the speed, I've actually probably haven't cared that much about speed in the past, but in the last week, I see so much value in just being able to do things quickly.
Yeah, if the because they built OSS to be excellent at tool calling, right? The fact that you can then, as long as you've got good architecture, you can get better outcomes. You don't need as heavy a model, and that's when speed becomes important. So you can get through, you know, local dev sessions faster. The only other thing I wanted to mention on the inference provider factor is I did see an article, someone like benchmarking the intelligence scores for the same model. I believe it was the GPT OSS. And there's about a 10-point difference between the highest and the lowest on the actual benchmarking. Mm-hmm. There are different ways that they execute these models that do impact those intelligence rankings. Or like, so it's the same model provided by different inference providers, and there's a 10-point difference on a standard benchmark. I thought that was pretty wild. So it does actually still matter.
Yep. That's why I'm big on interoperability. Like that's great that I can use Grok desktop, and I do, but I just want the full menu. I want all my options in one place, right? So that was the idea with creating my own fork and starting to customize it a little bit. So on the right here, this is my version that I've rebranded Ollama. So you can set this up with local Ollama, or I've been using the Ollama Turbo service, which was just recently announced. I think it's really good. There's not a lot of information about it yet because they're kind of, I think it's pilot period. So I haven't seen hard definitions on rate limits and stuff like that, but it has not been a problem for me. So yeah, Tom, I think at the core, that is most of it. But the last thing is, you'll notice I have Claude as an MCP. I have Claude MCP tools here, right? So as we're getting into Claude Code and all these CLI agents, you can orchestrate those various levels of agents and sub-agents through a tool like this. So I can essentially use this desktop app and still orchestrate my Claude Code agents, sub-agents, tools that they have assigned, etc.
And just so I can understand this looks really cool. So you facilitate that. Is it effectively like your Ollama desktop, kind of powered by Ollama Turbo, drives Claude code even in the CLI? So you've customized the CLI so you can spin
Exactly.
up. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
And is
and
there a
I didn't
router?
have to customize the CLI. Just by default, you can use Claude code as an MCP server. And all you have to do, well, in the CLI, you just run Claude serve, I believe. Or in your desktop app, you just configure these parameters, Claude as the command and MCP serve as the arguments. And then it's registered as you can run it as an MCP server. So that's all that is.
Right. But in practice, if I wanted to use that in my standard Claude kind of workflow and this setup, like where am I doing it? So for example, like I use Claude within Cursor, but then sometimes I'll use it standalone just in a terminal, right? And he's saying if I say Claude serve, I can't use it. Like that's just building the connection, the MCP connection. But how do I actually like practically use it to do my coding and interact direct with Claude? Like, Claude do this, Claude do that in the actual.
Yeah, just English language, my man. Maybe I don't understand your question, but here, let me try.
Thank you for playing along.
Yeah, let me just try to illustrate an example here, maybe. So I have defined some Claude code, like a claude.md file, which are the kind of custom instructions and context for that folder. Maybe this will help, Tom. I don't know. Use Claude MCP tools.
Just pretend like you're talking to GPT-3 when you talk to me. Low context window, simple instructions, basic outputs.
Okay. Use Claude MCP tools to refresh the vault at this location. This is my Obsidian vault where I've defined some custom workflows and stuff. So we'll see. So it's using, task, that is the task agent through Claude Code. Okay. So here you see subagent type. So within that folder, Vault 01, I have Claude subagents. Decomposition expert is one of those. That's essentially like the planning and creates assignments. It says, okay, here are the tasks we need to do. And these are the subagents that would be best for that task. So that's essentially what it is. And you can still do coding. It's just, there is a level of abstraction, I guess. Like you don't see all of the output from the Claude CLI, but there are other ways to do that with hooks and things like that. So Tom, does that help? Did that answer your question even 1%?
Yeah, that answers my question. Yeah. So this is sort of like, I have seen examples of this, like people like hacking on top of Claude Code or the Gemini CLI. That's where the Quen CLI comes from. It's just a fork of the Gemini one, right? Like it's just sort of like hacking on top of these things. And then there are guides on the Anthropic guys actually put out for Claude Code around using hooks and things like that as well, if you want to build applications on top. So you kind of have to build a bit around it, right, to replicate a workflow you might have had.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you remember Cursor CLI? Is it just Cursor CLI to launch that?
I never use it, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, you can, if you're using the Cursor version, you can still orchestrate and do all the same stuff through this. So last week, I guess just kind of ending remark on this, I've always envisioned some type of hybrid approach where you have local models in combination with the cloud-based, state of the art. And this is definitely, at least for me, a big step in that direction. So
right. And that was the whole idea behind experimenting with open code or open coder from last week's episode, right? Where you dove into that. And this is like the next step or the next iteration of functionality you can achieve.
Exactly. And I've seen quite a few people starting to create applications for that orchestration level. That's essentially what I'm after. But it's also new that I'm not necessarily spending a bunch of time trying to figure out these tools that will change the next week. And
yeah.
So this is just a very easy way to get that going. I have access to everything that I need pretty much right here.
Cool, mate. Well, if you want access to it, I assume go to the vault, check out the links. Everyone has to go to the vault. There's no more show links. It's just all in the vault. I can't be bothered putting links together anymore. AI is doing it for it.
Yeah, should we hit that again real quick? Do you want to walk
Yeah.
through it, or you want me to? Just
You can walk through it. Yeah, it's your beautiful creation. I'm merely a vessel. But the Vault is our is AI enabled kind of data bank for the podcast, and it has a whole range of amazing kind of agents that run in the background and a lot of data extraction and some RAG pipelines. It's very cool. So yeah, take us through
Yes,
the
sir.
Vault.
Yes, sir. So we've mentioned it a couple times, but not a lot of emphasis on it. We've had this in the works, and just this week consolidated some things into one website. So hopefully that's easy for everyone to use. There is a sign up. So if you go to the build vault, or you select a link at the vault link up here, it will just ask you to sign in. And that's just for like email lists and stuff like that. And then you'll have full access to the build vault. So this vault section is essentially just like a raw database with all the information. And then we have some highlights here, like if you're looking for specific products that we mentioned or links that were featured. So yeah, we'll keep building on this, but this is our go-to. This is the build Bible, I guess.
Yeah. And what I think, like, so we covered this a bit when you went through the demo in the back end, but if anyone wants to check that out several episodes ago, the thing that I think is really cool about this, and now I have a production use case for this that I'm going to start working on, is the architecture behind it basically takes streaming unstructured data and creates usable component parts of that data, enriches it, and then enables you to do interesting things with it, whether it's for us, so it's a podcast, right? And
Exactly.
is public, but you could build a version of this that was private, that's based on your own business documentation or a subset of that documentation, like your strategy documents and things like that, so that you could enrich a specific data set and enable people to effectively engage with it to refine either their understanding or develop kind of new material, new insights off that data. That's not necessarily easy because we produce so much unstructured data, and now is the time when we can actually use it for a productive output. But you need something like this, and this is just one way of doing it, but I think it's a pretty innovative way. This is one way of taking unstructured data and converting it into something that you can really get your hands on as either a non-technical user or a semi-technical user. So yeah, and it's a combination like what you built. It's a combination of RAG pipelines, of like effectively data extraction pipelines around, say, our podcast, as well as some agentic workflows on top where you can actually chat with it. So you've got an agent in here where you can engage with components. You can go to the source material if you click on each one. Like, it's just really, really cool. I don't know. I love it, man. Full credit. Like, it's built on top of an app that Greg Camrat put on his YouTube channel as well. So a version of that, but you can go and grab it. You can fork it from the build GitHub. You can play around with it. You can execute your own version.
Yep. Yeah. Like I said, it's a full pipeline. The YouTube transcripts, it's a little bit of a novel concept. It's not going to apply to everybody, but in a business, there are so many applications for this same pipeline, really. So all we do is upload a video to YouTube, and it's fully automated to the point where, I mentioned built this MCP server. So if you want to connect to this, you can pull information from the vault, and the whole process is automated. So extraction, vectorization, embeddings, everything, all automated. So I think it's pretty cool. I'm biased, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking, I love it. I'm thinking this could be the basis, like it could be the base layer of many different AI-enabled applications across, different business use cases, like just having a high-quality, connected, vectorized, and also relational, and also potentially like graph data store that a person can actually engage with. And then you could build AI applications on top. Like we covered artificial societies last week, which is an LLM simulation tool for testing marketing messages and marketing content messages. I think like a base layer of like, say, something like the Vault and then a simulation engine on top would be very effective in, say, the areas where I work, like sales, for example. Like you could use that as a CRM tool to then simulate the next best step in a sales process in an enterprise sale based on all of the context of that sale, but also a simulation layer based on the actual interaction patterns you have with, say, a person or an account or a group of people. Like, and I've got about 100 of those ideas in my mind. So yeah, it enables you to think orthogonally about how problems can be solved when you have these kind of building blocks that are only really available to us now in the world that we're in as application developers now. So yeah, it's super exciting, man.
Exactly. And that was the goal. This is kind of like the basis for a lot of demos that we'll do in the future. And in a business, these are the types of things that will replace full-on SaaS applications.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so that's the MCP server. So it's querying, when we mentioned JSON, VO3, very cool. All right, go and play with it. Sign up. If you need any of the links that we mentioned, they're all in the vault because AI is doing the show notes for me now and I'm not doing that shit anymore. All right, where are we going next?
Let's hit, didn't you have a demo for?
A couple of demos, yeah.
Yeah, let's turn it over to you, Tom.
Over to me. Okay, my demos this week are going to be a bit chaotic, if I can say that. So I have a couple of things to show and a couple of products just to highlight, and then I will publish any of the final outputs onto the GitHub. You guys can play with them. But I have been looking into a few different things this week to keep expanding my skills as a nascent agent engineer. And most of it is from LangChain. So using a couple of the pre-builts that LangChain have that are they're such a gift when you're trying to dive into agent engineering and really understand how these things work and how they can solve problems. So I want to take you through two of those. Then I have an AI options trading kind of agent that I kind of want to build as a test case. And I might touch that at the end because depending on how interested people are in trading, it might not necessarily be that interesting. So the first one I want to highlight is the DeepUi update that the LangChain guys released. That's a pretty simple and straightforward one. So the LangChain guys, they released this little video a couple of days ago on Deep Agents, this Deep Agents UI. And basically they released Deep Agents a couple of weeks ago and we covered it a little bit. They, as a kind of like a architecture unpack of Claude code and the sub-agents components and how you can manage it. And that was really cool. This is the repo here, Deep Agents. And this Deep Agents UI is a repo that they launched in order to use their open canvas and some other bits and pieces to effectively like enrich that as an agent that you can then see and run and engage with and then customize as well, which is really, really cool. So I thought I would get it running and show you guys. This is the repo here with the setup. So I've got, it's just DeepUi, and then you've got basically the back end is Deep Agents, which is their Python package. And then this Deep Agents UI is the Next.js kind of overlay over the top of it. And it's a relatively simple setup, but if you're a bit like me, it might take a bit of iteration. So, I found the cursor agent was pretty helpful for some of that. But effectively what it is if you go over if I take us over into the Deep Agents code base, you can see it here. They have this Deep Agents app here, where if I go into the model prompts, here we go. This is probably a better way to describe it. So the way that it's set up is basically a whole bunch of prompt engineering around basically creating sub-agents to iterate over the top of complex tasks, specifically research tasks, and giving it the ability to decide when and how deep it should go. That's the whole name, Deep Agents. So complex, go deep, simple, go light. But doing that through, prompt engineering and a degree of kind of routing. So the actual graph is relatively simple. It's here. So when you create these things, it basically just creates this deep agent, and it has a range of instructions and then a set effectively of like the tools that it can receive. And then the example they've set up in this repo is pretty cool, which is this research agent here. So the research agent has a couple of tools. So it's powered by Tavily for search, and then it imports from basically this deep agent repo. So it basically creates a deep agent as a sub agent. And then in this repo example, he's basically created like a couple of example sub agents that I can call on. So there's a research sub agent and then a critique sub agent that then critiques and does this loop, kind of like a React loop back and forth between these sub agents. And then, researcher instructions that you can customize. It's a really simple and cool way to spin up a basic agent. So I recommend if you haven't done it and you haven't used LangChain much, this is a really good place to start because it's not as complicated and definitely not as complicated as the one I'll show you next, which is the social media agent. But what is really cool, so I've got
Tom, I'm sorry, you're running that locally?
This is running locally, yeah.
Okay.
You can.
Yeah, just a side note on that. There's a LangGraph JSON file and it works by default. You can deploy it on LangGraph platform.
Oh yeah,
as well. So just side note there.
Oh, so you
it works really well. It's still in development, but sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your.
No, that's okay. That's really cool. So what you can just spin up the file and just load it direct into LangGraph Cloud.
Yeah, you just fork it to your own repository, and you follow the same process. All it is you select your repository, input the path to the langgraph.json file. You have to input some environment variables, and that's it. And you press next, and then it will deploy, and you can run it in LangGraph Studio, or you can connect to it remotely, even as an MCP. I don't know if it works by default with the MCP. That's, I guess, maybe preview for future, but that's what I was working on, was having it set up as an MCP server. So you're running the deep agents orchestrated through your desktop app, like I showed earlier,
Well, I think isn't the whole idea of all of these agents are MCP by default, right?
Some of their templated applications are, like they've already set them up that way, but not all of them. There's a wrapper. There's like an MCP,
the MCP
customization
wrapper
that you have to do. And I don't think this one worked by default as MCP.
So to connect it, basically to connect the backend into your UI component when you fork the repo that they've got, basically you just have an environment variable that says, all right, this is the sub-agent ID, so research. And here is the URL I want to send it to. Obviously, that's not production. So there we go. This is what I want, Studio UI. Cool. So that's running. Here's the graph. You can see it's pretty simple. An agent and the tools. And then over the top of that is my node server that's connected into that using those local variables there. And that looks like this. So you basically have get rid of you and put you over there. You have a simple interface, and they've basically enhanced this UI a bit, kind of like what you were showing with the OpenSUI project that they've got. They're trying to lean a little bit into like product design so you can see an execution and then start refining it for your own benefit. What I love about this also is the fact that it's in just a simple Next.js app, which means you could unleash just absolute hellfire of vibe coding on top of it without actually breaking any of the underlying agent architecture, which is a real risk if you're working in like a mono repo kind of equivalent, or just like have the back end and then you have the front end built on something else, but within the same environment. So I love that. And then they have these components which basically define this kind of chat pattern. And a lot of it's stuff that they've built in the past, but you can say, all right, give me research the initial performance benchmarks of GPT. But it also then gives you the feedback on all of these tool calls and a simple kind of exposure of these things within the context of your actual agent, like the actual graph and what it's actually doing. And then it will show you this task list aligned with that deep agent architecture that Harrison and those guys the LangChain guys were going through. And then it shows you kind of this nice kind of interaction way, like the sub agent and that sub agent output as well, which is really cool. Again, really simple kind of agent structure. Very basic, right? And then you can see the threads coming through and the different turns if you want to use Langsmith to sort of like engage with it locally, which is obviously super helpful. I thought it was a really cool little demo, really fun.
Yeah, I love this. If you haven't checked out the LangChain like starter apps and templates they have, definitely do, because they're great. And like Tom said, you can build on them yourself. I'd say I'm maybe a LangChain template addict or something. I basically built every template or tutorial that they have, and you learn a lot. You get exposure to new things that you weren't aware of. So, Tom, this is amazing. Can you? So
Well, full
essentially,
credit
this is like Claude code running in the background. This is a CLI based agent, but now there's a UI where it's easier to see everything, right?
Yeah, and it's specifically designed for the deep research pattern, but with this Claude code kind of like create a task list, offload to sub-agents. You could then start expanding it with other agent types underneath. Like you could expand a lot. But what I like about it is it has all of the UI hooks and things. It also has this file registry, so you can go in and see like the initial file component, and then it will write the report to that area. Like it's just a basic kind of initial exposure to building agentic apps that has a front end that you can interact with. I can imagine like you could build this and iterate with, say, a product manager as a developer really well around the actual agent experience, rather than having to always go into something like Langsmith, which is not, as well, to use a term you use all the time, normie friendly. This is much better.
It's a development tool.
And it also gives you the right cues for like what you should expose to the user. Like we're going through this a lot at the moment when we're debating like the kinds of agents we should embed into, say, a mobile app, which is one area where we're working at a lot through my day job. And one of the things is actually this stuff is like we're doing things in the background, the agent's working, but we're not being smart enough about what we expose and what we hide and what the users actually want and the feedback loop that they need when you're trying to work in a co-pilot situation. So things like this, which is a prototype, can give you some of that nuance and that insight that's not really clear if you're just like going through a chat interface or just doing like a loop in your local dev environment. Like it's just not the same. So yeah, that's another reason why I like it. Once this comes back, it'll write the file to there. So play with it. If you're not super au fait with getting like Python environment set up, this YouTube video that the LangChain guys put out, they show you all of the specific things to run. And then if you get stuck, use cursor to problem solve. That's what I did. But yeah, if I can do it, you can do it.
On the Deep Agents Python example that they have out there, you can still spin up sub agents. I believe this like base stock version they have, you can do that.
Yeah. So this is the Deep Agents repo. But what they've done for this is they basically just have this, they've added this example underneath it in examples/research.
Right. I meant more sub agents. Like in that UI, can you prompt it and say create a sub agent? And now I've tweaked this so much, I can't remember what the original exactly is, but
so
that's what I'm really, if you can differentiate and see like the actual agents,
so the way
out like an agent manager.
Yeah. So it's not specifically like you can't like kind of like Flowwise or one of those like just say, all right, and now I'm going to connect you up to this sub agent. This is more like a task flow where you offload the choice of sub agent and the path within a agent like Python effectively definition file. And then you define these prompts, the researcher sub agent, critique, the critique sub agent, and then the logical flow specifically applied to this task. But what you could do is you could basically get Claude to, like, one thing I would like meta approach to this would be use Claude and Claude sub agents to generate an agent swarm, test it in the CLI environment, update those prompts, take those prompts and put them into a LangGraph environment like this, then take it to production, because you could have all of the kind of guardrails and all the component parts and all of the observability and interrupts that an application requires. But you as a developer, you could start in the Claude sub-agent kind of generative mode, which I think would be a cool pattern to follow. Yeah, you can see there, like it's gone to the critique agent as we've been chatting. So this is super simple because it's only like a couple of calls, that's tools and things. So that's why I wanted to show it off as well.
Yeah, Tom, and we've talked about the kind of like JSON-based or schema-based agents, MCP servers, etc. So this, you could take your sub agents that you built with Claude and essentially, where all that purple is, those are just, I think, system prompt, and it's the same type of stuff that Claude Desktop creates. So
it's exactly the same, yeah.
Yep.
Except in this, you could then move over, all right, here's the summary, and it's written the file to the file area. This is an MD file. Gives you a nice little kind of UI to engage with it, similar to how ChatGPT's UI kind of looks and feels. Got a download button, like you can kind of give your users sort of out of the box agent interaction patterns that they're kind of used to as well, which is another thing I like about this, and probably one of the reasons why the guys wanted to release it. Yeah, so this is great. And then you can see our simple little benchmarks. Maybe I should have done this before the show. Hey, Cameron?
Nah. But yeah, amazing job. And with the Deep Agents package, it makes it, I think, like extremely straightforward. I was amazed at how simple the actual code. Like if you go look at the Deep Agents code itself, there's not a lot. And it's its own package that didn't exist before. So there's a lot more underneath behind the scenes. But with that, pip install Deep Agents and it's not that bad.
It is pretty simple. Like this is here it over on the left. The whole idea is like, yeah, this architecture diagram is the whole summary of it, right? And the actual, what it actually looks like in practice is a relatively simple amount of like, basically there is embedded within it is a to-do list, something so simple, right? And then the ability to spawn sub-agents. Yeah. So you can play with it and you can go through it. If you're not as au fait, you can always go into Cursor and just say, explain this. That's a great way to dive into like a new repo if you're a vibe coder. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. And then the next step is that I want to show you, and then I'll probably stop, is that is a very simple, this deep agent kind of output. You can see it here. That's very simple. And the actual graph, if I go and find my graph again, in here, is a very basic kind of graph setup, right? This researcher graph here is very, very simple. The next thing I'm diving into, which is something that I really want to get set up, both for the Vault and connect it into our platform, and then also use it in production as well for other like tasks that I have, is using the social media agent that LangChain put out. Now that is next level complicated compared to what we were just going through. You can go and check it out here. This is the repo that they have. And then there's this awesome, so this is sort of like the high level overview of like what it actually is, how it works. They basically scrape URLs, any kind of content URL. It goes and gets the content. It tries to understand the content and the nuance behind it and generates a report over the top of what it is, whatever it is. Then there's a step of validating and finding images. It generates a social media post, and then it has this feedback approval step, and you can schedule it. So that's the whole idea, but it's a great example of an ambient agent, and it's a good place to start. If you are moving on from say a simple one like that deep researcher to something more complicated. So that's where I'm at now. Follow this example. I went through it, but I was looking at it and I just thought, well, screw that. So I just put it all into Claude. I went and got my API keys. They have a pretty good kind of, they have a pretty good README in here around how to set it up, which I'll show you here. So I was reading through this. I'm like, all right, I reckon Claude could get a pretty good handle on that. So all I did was I went and got the API keys for a simple setup. So they have like simple versus complex, what they call in the full environment, a full setup or a quick start. I just used the quick start. I put those into an env file, and then I just said to Claude, just set this up. And it was great. It did all of it, which is awesome. So if you want to do that, you don't want to go through the configuration. But what I do want to show you is the next level kind of complexity over the top. So this uses over the top in terms of the agent architecture to really get a sense of like what one of these things looks like when you really have it doing some really challenging jobs. The simple setup is it's powered by Anthropic. There's Langsmith for observability. Then they use Firecrawl for scraping, and they use Arcade. Now we've talked about Arcade before, but this is sort of like authentication and data sources and sort of agent infrastructure service provider, right? It does a lot of different things, but holy shit, it was a delight to use, like an absolute delight. Like I was just blown away by just how good it felt. So Arcade, if you go and check it out, these are all the documentation. Like I was just really, really impressed. I'll go to the website. Yeah, here we go. This is basically, it's like you've got all your systems and you've got all your tools and your MCP servers, and then they're basically saying it's like tool management plus authentication. They're not the only ones. There's a bunch of them out there. It is a paid service like SaaS app, but there is a pretty generous kind of dev tier. You can test it out. And I just found it super easy to engage with. And the fact that they have so many of these downstream endpoints, particularly for something like this social media agent, is very, very helpful. Very easy to get started with. So what I want to show you is the way that the guys have set this agent up, this social media agent up, is they actually connect it to, or they recommend you use their agent inbox. Have we shown this agent inbox much? I know you're more.
We've definitely talked about it.
Yeah.
We haven't covered it in depth, but it's applicable to so many things, not just the email agent was the first thing that they released, I believe. But now you can find a lot of different template projects. They're just LangGraph graphs, and then this is like the management interface.
Yeah, and that's all it is, right? It's super easy to add an inbox. You just put the graph name, like generate a post is the name from the documentation in here. You can have a local, like your local URL or like a public URL, agent name, and then you just add it in there. So you can have a bunch of different inboxes, a bunch of different workflow processes, everything like that. And then you can see here, these are a bunch of the tests that I've done. Social media agent. So it also exposes, this is where it basically exposes the user, effectively the human in the loop kind of actions. And it's designed to be like a relatively easy to use interface that's still a bit dev heavy, but it's still convenient. It's like an endpoint for you to basically go and engage with when you build an agent like this. So I thought it was awesome to actually use because I hadn't actually used it until now. For example, this one was a prior execution loop where I set up Arcade, but the way the guys have it is they basically just have like a little bit of a loop and you could wrap this around so you could convert it into an actual app, basically saying like, I need you to authorize your they call it Twitter, obviously X. I need you to authorize X and your LinkedIn so that I can go and post on your behalf. And you can just expose those things in here as patterns from your agent in a really nice little UI. Yeah. So it's really cool.
And I've always seen this agent inbox, at least in the current state. This is still like an administrative or like development platform tool, but you could, and Tom, you'll have to remind me if this supports hooks and notifications by default, because I think that's really the intent is that you're able to orchestrate these things so that you're delivering notifications to like Slack instead, or, different.
That comes from, pardon me, that setup is in the actual advanced setup of this social media agent. They've actually just built like a hook in via Arcade to go into Slack where you can actually set it up to do that. I don't know if that's the case with here it is. Like this is the advanced setup and you've got like a Slack developer account, your Slack channel, and you can go in and just zoom in so you can see that. But you can always go to the documentation if you're interested in this as well. You create like a app setup, like that's where you're actually making a production grade. So you'd have to create like LinkedIn apps and X apps as well. So you're posting on behalf of your brand name or your company name as opposed to like Arcade or whatever it is. So not a dev setup, the quick setup. But then you've got down here, you've got the Slack setup here, where you actually go and run a cron job, push it into a Slack channel. Yeah. And they've got a bunch of the scripts that are already built for that.
Yeah, exactly. And the cron jobs. So you can schedule tasks through this, and that in itself is super powerful. Tom, I was trying to remember. Yeah, we had this set up for just like a simple test, a cron job that ran once a day and searched the internet for like AI news and then posts it in our Microsoft Teams channel.
The Teams channel I never go into.
I don't really either. Yeah, we've kind of gotten away from Teams a little bit, but
yeah, I'll get you off the Microsoft stack eventually. But yeah, so that's like the equivalent, right?
Yeah.
I would like to set this up with their agent to actually do the monitoring on an inbox and actually do through the entire flow that the guys have set up for an inbox monitoring agent as well. A couple of things on this. So what I want to show is like, I'll get this run. They have just a little post script so you can test it. I'll just tell Claude to run that for us and we should see it appear over here in the agent inbox while we're chatting. Oops. The only thing about this is by default, it uses Anthropic, which gets expensive. So I'm thinking of downgrading. Either if I'm going to use this, I'm just going to downgrade the model or swap it out for maybe some of the stuff that you're talking about, a local model or something similar.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned the Llama Turbo. Since I'm paying the $20 for that, just running these deep agents through a Llama Turbo, like that alone might justify the $20. Cause I think the research, I don't know about you, but it was like, I ran a couple, it was like $7 per run. So that's about the point where I was like, yeah, I'm switching this, I'm switching this to a
Yeah.
Llama.
Like, for example, on that deep agent UI research report, one of the tests I ran on that, it was a bit more in depth. It was actually something I needed to do actual research on. I was like, all right, I might go to like, Deep Researcher or Gemini for that. It cost me $1 for like a pretty, like a basic kind of markdown file at the end. So yeah, Anthropic's got to sort out their pricing. They're going to get crushed, or at least on that front. But anyway, while that's running, so you can see this is kicked off here. And I want to go and check out what the actual tracing looks like over here, my monitoring project. Cool. So this is my little social agent. Let's check out and see what all these runs are. Right, here we go. This should be the one that's generating right now. And you can see, I might make that a little bit bigger. So you can see like everything that's going off and doing. Now, here's all the output. It's basically they're using like a blog post as the example from the LangChain blog. And they have a bunch of the content that's coming through, on all these different steps. What I actually really want to show is the actual graph. So if I open the graph, no, that's not it. Let's check it out here we go. So this is what I really wanted to show off, which is like to really get a sense of the complexity behind this. So this is like the supervisor layout, right? Around like the high level kind of flow and all of the different sub graphs that sit beneath this. If you look at these sub graphs, like just the level of complexity that's being kind of embedded within each of these sub graphs, like each of these graphs in this, and this is like a relatively straightforward flow, right? This is like a automation flow, which is pretty typical for this kind of use case. But even within that, they've got like these content verification subgraphs, formatting the data, a reflection loop on different groups of tweets, grouping tweets by content. Like it's really, really complex and cool, or nuanced, I guess I should say. And this is the level that like it's kind of hard to engage with just out off the bat if you're not familiar with sort of building some of those simpler ones. So that's why I wanted to sort of show like this works. Like, some people often see these kinds of graphs or these kinds of complexity and you're like, oh, that can never work. It'd be too error based. Like this system actually works and it works really well, but it gives you a sense, or at least it gave me a sense of like, what it really takes in terms of engineering kind of system design to get an agent that can actually do what is in practice a relatively simple business process, which is sourcing content, converting it into something you can share and pushing it to your social media channels. Like it's non-trivial, right? And then you've got these other kind of more complicated graphs that go into the more complex, flows in other component parts of the app that they have. So generating the post down here, like finding sub images. They've got a sub graph over there, like looks like this. Like this is hardcore stuff. I just love the fact that you can go and engage with it. You can learn with it. You can try it out. And then you can see the actual output components coming through in these systems like this agent inbox that is relatively easy to get set up. Like I got this set up and I'm not the most technical person in the world. So yeah, I just think it's a great resource. What I want to do with this is connect it up into our vault so that each of these component parts, it basically scrubs through and it gets those components. Then it will go out and validate those links and then start generating content via these iterative loops or these loops that then just go into an inbox that we have, and then we can post it. And that's a pretty solid, task that marketing assistants or, social media managers might have to do on a daily basis. And this could wrap up the entire thing based on, a content bank that any business would be able to build. Even we've got it, and you and I spend 5 minutes a week on this podcast, right? So it's really cool. So try it out. Just fork it, give it a try.
That's amazing, Tom. Like you said, this is an incredibly complex example. And there's so much you can learn from this or fork and use for your own purposes. But that's probably the most complex graph that we've shown so far. I think so.
So this is what I'll just, because that's idling, and just, it does take a while. I think that's another problem with this. Like, there's a fair bit of latency, but the whole idea is it's supposed to run in the background. So you're not supposed to really engage with it until like the agent comes to you in the inbox and says, hey, I've got something for you to check out. But if I was going to optimize it, I'd probably try and make it a bit faster. But you can see here, this is one I ran before. This is effectively what you get. If you go and check out the YouTube channel, you can see the interaction that they've built for like approving or optimizing. But I just said, yeah, approve it. Like, it'll get pushed out to my LinkedIn and my social media and my X account. And then you can actually see it in practice. If I was going to do this as an app, obviously you'd probably wrap it in something a bit nicer and try and visualize it, like a social preview or something like that.
Yeah. But I think, like you mentioned, the approval, I think you can call those as endpoints, right?
I think the full setup, there's a lot more you can do with it. And also that's why they built that Slack connector, so you can just like give it feedback or approve it directly via a Slack channel or a Slack message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So very complex on the back end, but making it super easy to use, like you said, through Slack or some other tool, or even a tool for other agents. I mean, that's really what we're talking about at the end of the day.
Yeah. And this would be, for us, at least in our workflow, we have content generation, content bank, which is like our podcast. Then it goes into a extraction pipeline you've built. Then it goes into a storage environment that's pulled those insights out. And this would come in at the end of that pipeline and be fed by those data points to generate the content that we would then come in at the end and just approve. Anyone who's done that, in the past, say 5 years ago, if you were running something like this operation, you would have people, if you were wanting to do it at that scale, it would be time consuming if you were only doing it. But this kind of agent architecture stack across those little steps basically abstracts all that away into software, which is a great example of services becoming software in the agentic world, right? All of those components were administrative tasks, not necessarily whole jobs, but they were definitely blocks of time that no longer need to be spent like that. So yeah, try it out. Everything in here. Claude was actually very good at engaging with this repo. So I recommend using Claude. Just fork it and then do your init and then just ask it. Whereas I found on the other one, it wasn't as good. Yeah.
Tom, are you using DeepWiki at all?
I stopped using it because I found that Claude, I can point Claude at pretty much any URL and it seems to be fine. Yeah. But I don't know, you?
Yeah, I think generally I'll use DeepWiki as part of my standard workflow as an MCP server up front for like the research and compiling the context for the LLM. So I'll take the DeepWiki link, feed it to my agent that has DeepWiki MCP, and then it's able to, the direct link generally is going to be okay, but it's able to pull, it's more efficient because it's doing things on the back end. But yeah, that's kind of my standard workflow. As long as it's a public repo and it's in DeepWiki, it takes like 10 minutes to index if you have a private repo. But I'll just feed it the DeepWiki link, and then it has a really good understanding of what that project entails.
Let's see if there's one for the social media agent. Yeah, there is. Yeah. Here we go. The whole idea of this is it's basically LLM friendly, and the Cognition guys built this in order to make GitHub repos more traversable by their agent, Devon. And then you can create DeepWiki equivalents on private repos as well if you're a subscriber or if you use theirs. So you can index your entire code base on a DeepWiki using the same methodology and keep it private. I assume they're optimizing this just for their own agents, and now I assume so with Windsurf. The last thing I want to show you, if I can, very briefly, or would you like to go through some of your full loop stuff?
Yeah, go for it. Are you onto the trading?
Yeah, I was just going to mention it very briefly anyway.
No, I think a lot of people, including myself, are interested. This seems like I saw a lot of people trying to do this with LLMs early on. It seemed like it would be pretty easy, or not easy, but like a good use case to try out. But it's actually very complex.
It's super complex. Yeah. So I don't know, so first up, I'll just get this up here and show you like what I've started to kind of I'm not building anything custom. Like I'm basically just seeing like what you can be achieved with the current tools. I know a lot of people are playing with it. There's a lot more crypto AI trading stuff out there. I'm not really a degen. I'm not really into crypto. It's not my thing. But to back up a little bit, basically a few years ago, so between sort of startups that I had, I got really into options trading. Most people start out trading shares where you're buying and selling, right? It's all very basic. It's pretty simple, and it's basic to describe, and it's hard to do well, obviously, like Warren Buffett. But once you get through that phase of trading, generally you start looking at what are called derivative trading securities. Well, they're not securities, derivative trading kind of contracts. And there's a couple of different types. I was quite interested in options, and options are effectively like insurance contracts that you can buy and sell over shares. Now, I always describe it as insurance because it's a simple kind of an analogy. It's not exactly like that. Like, it's definitely not exactly like that. But that's a way to think about them in terms of like, if I buy an options contract, it basically gives me the right to something in the future if a certain thing happens. Kind of like if you buy insurance on your house and your house burns down, then you have a payout amount. That's effectively what an options contract is. And you can, unlike insurance, as an options trader, you can buy and sell. So I can buy these contracts and I can also sell these contracts. They're highly leveraged. They're very risky, and you shouldn't do it unless you put money in that you're willing to lose. And you should definitely not do it unless you have done a fair bit of research and paper trading before you do it live. And even when you do that and you think you're confident, you're still going to lose money. So it's definitely not for the faint of heart. But it's interesting and exciting, and it's very technical, which is why I liked it. So between startups, I tried to sort of develop a couple of different trading strategies and execute them. And then I did that for a while, made some money, lost some money, started a new startup, and I stopped doing it. But recently I've been talking to a friend of mine who is still trading options, and he was saying, well, is it possible to do options trading with agents? And that sounds like a pretty interesting engineering challenge. I have met a few people in different like dev communities who are either working in quant trading firms that are actually actively working on this, people in the LangChain community who are doing this. So one of the most prominent people, I think, is a guy out of New York who's building an agentic AI hedge fund. And this is like a proof of concept, right? So this is his equivalent, but it's not options. So that's an example of one. But what I really wanted to do was just figure out if I could build an agentic version of what a lot of people have been using ChatGPT for over the years, which is like, they just start asking questions and then they try and get GPT to go out, get them the data and give them an answer like, what's oversold at the moment and has a really good call option spread, or the balance between, say, put options and call options at the money, which is just a fancy way of saying, is something going to go up or down? Does the market think something's going to go up or down? All of those things to basically use LLMs in a structured way to scrape through and get more data than basically any one human would be able to at once, and try and give individual traders an advantage that, say, quant firms have had for a very long time. So there's a whole bunch of these platforms out there. So the first step is I just basically wanted to see like what's out there. So I went to this cool website called mcpcentral.io to try and find MCP servers. And I found one called Polygon. So Polygon.io is a developer kind of finance API. And you can, as an individual, get access to different data sets. And typically they sell to trading apps, Robinhood, etc., to try and basically be the data provider for these kinds of apps. But these guys have an MCP server, which is what you can see here on the right-hand side, which is what I'm running. So they actually have an MCP server. You can just connect it up to, I've connected this one up to Claude, I believe. And you can you can just download the repo and you can give it a try. And then it shows you all of the different kind of like tools, calls you can get. And you can also embed it into your Claude desktop app, which is something I did. And the reason why I was doing this is often how I start with, or how I like to start with thinking about AI apps, is to basically just use these layers to then figure out what's possible, and also figure out if there's actually value in building anything, because often you can get 80% of the way there just by using these chat apps like Claude Code or ChatGPT. So here is the MCP server of Polygon here, and you can see all of these different tools that they've got. So, get, daily open close rates, list all the different trades for different people, like insider trades. That's a big, like, kind of like equities trade move. bunch of this stuff. They've got crypto in there, all these different things. Now, I'm just using the free version, so a bunch of this stuff is not available. But once you start paying, and it's about $80 a month, I believe, for the basic, you can start getting a lot more of this information. But there are these toolkits out there for developers to use. Another one is just called Financial Market Data, I think is just the basic one. But I think this Polygon one is a bit better, and it's a bit better set up for AI, like application developers. From there, I basically just played with it for a while, and I was just like, all right, well, these are all the tools I can use. Tell me, all right, get me the inside trades for NVIDIA, for example, and see if it'll go out and get that. It might not based on my subscription rate, but yeah, it's processing all those tools. You can see it there. Can you see that? Should I zoom in a bit? Probably a bit better. And we'll see what it comes back with. The next step to where I'm at with this is like, all right, it's definitely possible. Yeah, the current tools. So I just need to upgrade, but you can see the equivalent. Like you can call the tools and it can give you the response rates, and then you can get the data set and embed it. The next step that I went through was like, well, how could I visualize it? And then I used V0. So here's V0 to start like seeing, well, could I just generate like JS charts that are trader specific? Because this is non-trivial. Like if you've ever done any front-end dev and you've tried to do this in the past, like this stuff is not fun because trading charts are always very specific. So I literally just said, build me all of the options, trade kind of profit and loss visualization charts into a UI that I can use. Like, how many was that? What am I up to? I'm only up to V9. So that's 9 prompts and I'm already here. Like this stuff is great. So I've got my base layer of the different charts, and then I can start using this to basically like options change things like this, that I can then start to use to try and hook into this Polygon kind of data set. And then my goal is to basically have a very simple chat interface that actually engages with these visualization environments to say, all right, well, go and get me a combo trade, multi-day combo trade on 0-day options across these different equities and this index, and visualize the projected P&L or the different trade scenarios. So for example, it might open these certain scenarios and then based on certain criteria, close and open other ones based on technical indicators. And I want all of that to just be embedded into some sort of agent. So yeah, it's a really fun area. It looks like it can work, but it's based on what I've seen in the market so far. So there are a couple out there. You can just Google around for them. They're not purely agentic in what you and I would call like an agentic application layer. They're like, if this, then that kind of if else conditional statements across like different technical indicators coming into like a logical flow. It's not like an agentic kind of decision tree in a pure sense. One of the ones that I really like is Option Alpha. These guys, they're an example. And then the other one to check out is Quant Connect, if anyone's interested in this. And these are sort of reference algorithmic trading platforms.
They're essentially providing data, right? Like they're, at least in this sense, like a data provider, essentially, right?
These guys hook into brokers and they're a data provider, yeah, but then they have the UI layer over the top. Plus they have like this bot automation toolkit, which isn't, as I said, like an agentic layer, but it's very, very technical. What they both have, which is really cool, which is I think what will be an exciting thing to see once all of these are purely agents, is that they have these strategy explorers that the communities contribute, and then you can fork or subscribe to a quant, like in this case, it's a Quant Connect kind of like investment strategy that you can then subscribe to, and it tells you what the holdings are and the returns are. So I can imagine like an optimized meta ETF that optimizes into the best agentic options and trading strategies that are just constantly being like iterated on and self-refined, that you could then like basically say, all right, just only weight my portfolio of like cash into the top 5 performing agentic trading strategies at any time in the top 100 kind of benchmark, and just balance out everything and close everything out as you go through those. Like that would be pretty amazing. Yeah. So that's been on my mind.
Well, Tom, seems like I'm calling it now. This is what's going to hook you into being obsessed with MCP.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Because as soon as I did that, I was like, now I know why Cameron's so obsessed. It's like, I need these and I need them to work. I don't need them everywhere. And it's just not there for me right now. So yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah, man. I know I talk about MCP constantly, and but I think you just have to get your hands on it and have a use case that makes sense to you, and it will all come together.
So this is the example this is the example one that I got running this MCP server. I thought you'd be pretty proud of me getting this moving as Mr.
Hell
MCP.
yeah.
And it has a little
Yeah,
pedantic.
that's awesome.
I've never used pedantic, but yeah, this little pedantic kind of AI agent framework over the top. It's not really an agent framework like that's really hardcore, at least in this execution of it. So that's what's running here. But it's a very simple kind of terminal interface. Basically, they built it to just give you a sense of what's possible. So you can just fork it and get it running. Like it's really easy. Here is the instruction here at Polygon on the, yeah.
Have you seen the MCP UI thing? It's taken the internet by storm, at least in the MCP space.
This guy from Shopify.
Yeah, it's not developed by Shopify. In fact, I sent you the wrong link. Here, let me get you this one. This is their MCP UI. This is their actual website. The same guys who developed this also, I think it was Git MCP, which is very similar to the deep wiki that we were talking about earlier. It's like context understanding on your code base. But they built this out, and yeah, maybe we'll cover it here in the coming weeks. But Tom, as you were talking about building UI and stuff like that, this is the first thing that I thought of, because this is now getting a lot of attention.
Got it.
I mean, there's so many.
That's really cool. This is well, so it's like a UI toolkit that you can then expose into chat interfaces, right?
Exactly. So a lot of the MCP stuff, it happens in the background, and then Claude or whatever MCP client will sometimes, interpret that and can create visualizations, but that's kind of the Wild West. You could get anything out of that. This is, I don't know, more of a structured approach, or controllable maybe. I don't know. Again, haven't gone deep on this yet, but I definitely intend to. I think there are tons of use cases for this.
This reminds me, actually, have you seen like I believe it's the Vercel AI components. It's kind of like that library, AI elements. I was actually playing with this for something that I was trying to build recently, and it's from a developer, this guy. He's got some great GitHub repos on Shadcn UI components, and then they released this as basically their AI elements for Shadcn that you can then just hook into using their components as well. It's kind of like an equivalent, right? Where you can embed this in chat and then like generate UI elements, all the components here.
Yeah, there are a lot of interesting projects centered around that. I don't know if it's like dynamic UI creation, but
yeah, Copilot Kit's another one, right?
Yeah,
that one got a lot of attention, which I think is really cool. I've never built anything with it, but I spoke to some of the guys about it. Yeah, like these things, like reasoning output, and just like pre-built elements.
And then Magic UI 21 or something. It's kind of a weird name, but there was a really popular one couple recent times, at least.
Are these the guys that released that that new terminal, agent terminal? This is Magic UI. This is cool.
I haven't seen that. Could be.
This is one of the many things I'm trying to ignore on X. Yeah, this is cool. Oh, these are similar AI UI components. Nice one. All right. Did you want to go through anything else, mate? Any other demos?
Yeah, we plan so many things, and then it seems manageable, but I think we just have so much fun going through things.
Well, 2 each is probably good. I don't know.
What's that?
That's okay. 2 demos each, or a demo each is fine each week.
Yeah. Well, I burned up mine on one that wasn't even planned. So, Tom, what I'll do, I'll record a demo separately, but just to give a preview, what I had planned to talk about, or at least start talking about, maybe it's more of kind of a series thing, but at least what I'm calling full loop development. And of course, a lot of that is centered around MCP servers. So my intent is to show how I've started leveraging MCP in my development process, all the way from like planning and research to evaluating the logs, being able to see behind the scenes, like database schemas across the board, all the way, even to evaluations. So part of that was like, I have a Langsmith MCP server where you've built out, researched, and then deployed your LangGraph agent. Then you can see the traces directly in the terminal or your agent. And that's why maybe there's another name for it. I haven't heard many people talk about that yet, but for now I'm calling it full loop development. So yeah, I'll just do a demo on that, at least to get it started. And Tom, I
That'd be
think there are a
sick.
lot of areas to even the
Yeah.
demo you just showed where that could be applicable.
I think a lot of people struggle if they're like me because you want to do AI enabled development, but a lot of people struggle with the loops you have to go through to give the model the context it needs. So I guess what you're describing is this is your architecture for development where you kind of leverage all of the tools and inputs at the right moment for the context in the task that you're doing in your development flow, right? From planning to implementation to deployment to bug testing to everything.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And the idea is not full automated development. What I am not promoting, like just tell your agent to go and now it can completely orchestrate the entire thing. In the past, I've compared like the agent engineer. I think it's very similar to like a music producer, where to be a good producer, you have to really understand your tools and know when to apply them. And at least for me, it's like exactly the same thing. So that's what I'm trying to promote is learn your tools, learn where they fit and how you can speed up things without going like full vibe chaos,
Yes. And I think even practically, like it would be great to see that in a demo, because even practically at a small step, like just using these tools and then having them say everything is fine. And you can literally see on the screen, like I have this problem with V0 all the time. They release their agent equivalent, but I have this problem all the time. Like, for example, very simple things like it's easier for me to prompt it because I know front-end development. But if you don't know any front-end development, all you see is just a breaking change. And you're like, you're losing your shit. I'm like, what the fuck did you do? Like, don't tell me everything's fine. And I think people get quite frustrated. If you can embed some of those feedback loops within it, if you're doing local dev or if you're using like a customized setup like yours, you'll have to build those things yourself. Whereas if you're using something like GPT-5, some of these coding implementations, they have some of those things built in. But even then, like it's still not reliable. Like I'm surprised Cursor doesn't have more reliable tool execution already overlaid over the top of it.
Yeah, I'm excited to see more, I don't know, like guardrails types of things for vibe coding. I think that's absolutely needed at this point. So where like if you're not so technical, it can automatically inject or keep things in line. And that's kind of what I'm talking about here. And actually, as an example, just yesterday, I was working with someone and Claude Code, not a technical person, set up a lot of these automations as hooks so that when they commit to GitHub, it takes care of a lot of the things that I would typically prompt out, but just does it automatically and prevents a lot of that. Man, I've had so many times where it's like, hey man, I just spent 10 minutes and I had to refactor this whole thing and now you're good to go. And it's like, well, the entire point, I was deploying it to the cloud, not running it locally. And then it just reverted everything to run local,
Yeah.
So that is frustrating. And you still have to understand what's going on to be effective. Now, Replit V0, you can just wing it and actually deploy an application, but I don't promote that for anything past like proof of concept or here, show somebody.
Well, even those things, like they make really simple bad mistakes. And I sync all my changes into a GitHub repo and say V0, which then automatically deploys to Vercel. And that's an integrated system. That's a code gen engine into an integrated kind of cloud deployment environment. They control every single endpoint and deployments still fail, right? Even from that environment. And then simple stuff like I was using it where, like I was just saying in those options charts I was showing in the demo before, they just break outside of the container, like really simple basic shit. And you're like, you could take a screenshot of that. Like there's a lot of these things that are not built out that require kind of tooling. And then more complicated stuff like I know Claude has gotten significantly better once you can run bash like within the Claude session, and it's gotten significantly better at kind of iterating over like local dev server errors. That's why you can run a lot more Python stuff, or at least I can, with Claude Code now, just because the bash is embedded within the flow. But even then, it's not perfect. Yeah, so I'm keen.
And that's a great example. The easy ones I can think of, like Cloudflare has logs and observability as an MCP server. Vercel just recently put out an MCP server, Supabase. So a lot of these kind of back-end systems, definitely spend some time figuring out how you can make your agents proactively observe the logs.
Well, that's really cool. All right, I'm keen to see it. Full loop development. Maybe I could try and get into this MCP world of yours in an obsessive way like you.
I've been doing this subliminally, or maybe not so subliminally, but
yeah,
I'm pulling you over to the
subliminal.
MCP side.
Definitely not subliminal. Like, yeah, more like constantly reminded.
Yeah, I know. Every time I mention it, I'm like, hey, sorry, Tom.
Surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if you rock up with an MCP tattoo next time. But I'm keen to see it. And hopefully I'll be there. If I am unavailable, which I might be next week. Yeah, go for it. Full loop development.
Cool, man. Well, 1 million likes and I'll get an MCP tattoo.
For real? Well, how many subscribers? Yeah. How many subscribers and then would you get an MCP tattoo? Like,
I don't know. Not in the thousands, probably.
Not in the thousands, yeah. So like,
and not your bots that you create to make that happen.
Yeah. Well, there's an agent for that. There is an agent for that. All right, mate. This has been great.
Yeah, likewise. Well, thanks for showing me those demos. Now I have additional tools to play with, experiments. But yeah, I will do that demo. Look out for that. Yeah, Tom, talk to you next week. It's been a blast.
Yep. See you, mate. Bye.
Bye.